Hello, crew. I've got a busy week ahead, so I better get this video up if I'm going to get something up. As you know, I arrived back from a fabulous week in Minnesota, soaking in the ice, at 8 o'clock in the evening in Pasco, at which point Sarah met me in the van and we drove to a rest area. So actually, interestingly, Google routed us north out of the Tri-Cities up to Vantage. So we took the back road all the way up to Vantage, and then from there over, and we spent the night up at the rest area outside Cleellum. So it was nice. Actually, it was nice getting that way instead of staying on the freeway all the way up through Yakima. And I think it actually saved us 10 minutes. So that was good. Let me see, what do I have here? The next morning, so we slept there. It ended up being really cold. It was like 22 degrees. Negative 6°C. And so we were, once again, I mean, the blankets were warm enough. We were good there, but as Sarah said, her nose got a little cold. So I slept because I was tired. I slept pretty well. Woke up like 5:30, got up at 6 and started driving. And we drove over the pass, and it was really pretty. And we stopped at a Fred Meyer somewhere on 18, like by Kent or something, Maple Valley area, and got some gas. And actually, it's funny. So we stopped, and then Sarah took a shower in the van, and she felt great. I ate some breakfast. And then we headed on to Olympia, and I was able to drop her off at her meeting by 9 o'clock easily. And we saw Ray, no longer Shanna Alflatuni, which was fun. And then I actually played a couple devotions, a couple hidden words for devotions at that meeting to get us started. And then I took off, and I was messaging with Pablo Bellin, but I never was able to get a hold of him. So I went down to Squaxin Park, which used to be Priest Point Park, which is what you're seeing in the video here, and walked around. I did actually a lot of walking around. I walked, 2.5 miles all over, just kind of checking things out and looking for a good spot to get in the water and have a sit. And most of the beach access spots were on the tide flats, so they weren't great. Now, I did a 13-minute soak because water temperature 45 degrees, which is 7°C, I believe. And so 6 minutes plus 1 minute for every degree above 0°C. That's what I did, 13 minutes, and it was nice. And I actually, in this, you'll see, since the tide was out, the post that's next to me there was completely out of the water, and I hung my towel and my jacket on that and put the phone right down there. And so I actually had the camera right there as well, so that it was kind of a good shot from there. Got out, went back up to the van, felt really good. It was actually warm. It was in the 50s. It was really, it just didn't feel cold at all. I got back to the van. I actually took a shower, cleaned up. I downloaded all my pictures and video onto my laptop. I actually watched the video of the soak just to see, because there were some birds flying by and stuff, and I thought it was kind of cool to see. So, and then I got everything done, and I was gonna prepare up. So today, the 12th of February is the 7th year anniversary of us buying our van. And I was going to post in the Travato group about that. So I went to turn on the van to check the mileage because I was writing up a post, and I couldn't find the keys. And I started looking, and I couldn't find them. And then Sarah called me just, in the middle of that. And I told her, and she said, well, she had her set of keys. So she said, if you need, call, and I'll have Shanna or Ray bring me over, and we can, deal with it later. But I knew I'd unlocked the van when I got back from the soak, so I knew they had to be in there somewhere. And I looked for half an hour or longer, and I couldn't find him, and I just started emptying everything out. And finally, I opened up my camera bag, and there's a side pocket where I keep the camera. And as I started opening it, I remembered that when I put the camera in, I noticed that it was a little tight fit. And sure enough, the keys were down in the bottom there, blocking the camera. So that was quite the entertainment. Made me feel old, but I did find the keys. And then from there, now it was about I kind of goofed off a little bit. It was around 2:00 by then, and I figured I should go down to Miller Sylvania State Park to try to get us a campsite. And so I drove down there. Actually, I drove the back way on Henderson Boulevard, and it was kind of nice. I mean, God, the area has just changed so much, but it was a nice drive down there. And I got to the park, and it's interesting because we've been going to Miller Sylvania once or twice a year the last few years. Just every time we're in Olympia, we stay there. And it seems like every time we go in there, it gets more run down. And the last time we were there, there was some water over the road by the entrance gate and the pavilion where they check you in. And this time I came in and they had the whole side closed, and the water was all the way up around the pavilion. And it looked like the swamp had just grown. I don't know if the road is sinking or what's going on there, but it was all completely underwater. So they had the road closed, and you had to go, they'd split up the exit way into 2 lanes. So I had to go around the other side. And then I went in to try to find a campsite. And when I looked on the board, there were only 2 open campsites with hookups left. And so I went in and I ran into a ranger, and I said, I said on the board 230 and 227 are both open. She said, somebody just took 230. And I said, well, I guess I'm taking 227. She said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So I got the last open campsite. And this was like 2:30 in the afternoon, in February. It was a Saturday, so that's understandable. So I went in and I set up and I filled the water tank and did some stuff. And then I headed back in to have dinner with Sarah. And actually, I came back into town on Little Rock Road just to see how that's changed. And they've put roundabouts all over the place down there at Hank's Corner and all along by the middle school. So yeah, that was pretty good. Oh, and then as I'm coming in, I actually I stopped by Tumwater Falls Park to check it out, just to go for a second walk, because I had some time to kill. And so I parked down at Historical Park, and you can actually walk up to the Falls Park from there and get in kind of down by the bridge at the end. And so I walked up there, and I walked all the way up to Tumwater Falls Restaurant, which is now closed, I think, and then back down, and I was just, I was looking at it, and it just makes me sad that, nobody gets in the river anymore. Nobody gets in the water. Like, there's no swimming anywhere. You can't get in Capitol Lake. Nobody even tries to get in. We used to go down and play in those fish ladders. And obviously, I can see them not wanting you to jump off the falls, but I don't know. It's a great place to get in the water, and it's all to look at now and not to experience. And I just don't like that. It just makes me, I don't know, I feel like an old fuddy-duddy. And so I was wandering up and back, and there were quite a few people around, and there was a group of kind of mixed-aged people down by the bridge there. And as I walked down, I stood on the bridge and looked at the spot where Chuck Hagan used to jump off, or at least I saw him do it at least once, maybe twice. And I was like, that was pretty cool. It was pretty crazy. And so I was walking down, and there was a teenage or early 20s woman and a guy about her age and some younger kids, kind of standing there at that place where we used to jump over the fence and then run across to then jump off the cliff. Or I should say you did, because I never jumped off the cliff right there. I jumped from the other side. And I was walking by, and like the creepy old guy that I am, I said, when we were kids, we used to go out here and jump off that cliff. And the girl who was standing there said, my dad says that he did that too 40 years ago. I was like, 40 years ago. And I was like, did he go to Tumwater High School? And she said, yeah. I said, what's his name? And she said, Dan Osier. So it was Dan Osier's daughter. And I was like, oh my God, I went to high school with your dad. He's a year older than me. And I was good friends with Pat and Craig Daniels. So I gave her my name, and I don't know, and she was super friendly and very engaging. And so I did feel a little bit like a creepy old man telling creepy old man stories to young people who didn't ask me to share. But anyway, I was glad I did, because I had a conversation with her, and I said, yeah, he used to be into BMWs in high school. And she said, yeah, he's moved on to Audis now. And apparently he's a civil engineer, which is cool, because the last I heard, he was working at a pizza place. And he was really sharp, and I'm glad that he's doing something interesting. So so that was kind of fun, surprising to see the child of someone. I guess it's not that surprising in Tumwater to see the child of someone I went to high school in Tumwater with, but still, yeah, it was kind of cool. So anyway, I went from there back up to the meeting Sarah was at, and I had dinner with them at the meeting, and then kind of sat in. They're talking about summer schools for the next year. And then we go back to Miller, Sylvania, and actually it's pretty funny, because this meeting, they were going to go to 9 o'clock, and Sarah said, I'm leaving at 8. I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. I need to get my rest. And so they actually quit the meeting at 8 instead of 9, and I don't think anyone was any worse for the wear. So we get back to camp, and of course I open up my computer, and the videos are gone, and I really don't know what happened. And I did a search, and it found the shortcut from the app that I'd used to play the video, and it was pointing to the directory on my hard drive in the pictures folder where the video should have been, and the video's gone. There's no sign of it being deleted. The only other thing I can think of is that somehow I hit a Control-Z to undo an action, and I had the Windows Manager open, and the last action in that had been copying from the SD card, and so it just undid the copy, but then it just lost the files, and I'd already cleared them off the card. So anyway, I was pretty bummed about that. This morning, I got up and I went to have coffee with Dave. And Dave and I had coffee, and it was great chatting with him. We had a good get together. And then I got your message, and I had 2 hours to kill after we'd finished the coffee. So, and you mocked me for not having video evidence of my soak. So I figured I'd go back to the park and do another 13-minute soak to show you. And as you can see in the video, the tide was up. It was beautiful, sunny. It was much colder. It was like in the mid-30s air temperature, so much colder outside. But I got in the water. I felt good again. Didn't feel bad. And I get out there, and I'd heard the alarm really clearly when I was in there before, so I figured that wouldn't be an issue. And I get out there, and there's a few people running around, not as many as before. And actually, I don't know, if you watch this video, there's a point where a fish jumps out of the water right behind my head. And so I'm out there, and all of a sudden, the alarm goes off. I don't hear it. And so I'm out there, just soaking away, having a good time. And after a while, you get that sinking feeling like maybe it seems like it's been longer than it should have been. And I was really listening hard. And I thought maybe I heard something, but I really didn't want to get out before the 13 minutes, because I knew, that the peer pressure that you put on me to stay in that full 13 minutes, it was overbearing. Like I didn't know that I could live with myself if I got out before that full 13 minutes was up. So I sat out there, and then eventually I got up and walked out. And I walked back over there, and of course I could hear the alarm going off as I got closer. And I realized that I'd stayed in significantly longer than I'd intended to, but I still felt really good. I didn't feel abnormally cold or anything. And I kind of took my time and dried off, and I put on my coat like I always do. And my hands weren't particularly unusually cold, I didn't think. But my hands had gotten really cold with you in Minnesota because the ambient temperature was so much colder. And so my hands weren't, I don't think, there went the fish, just jumped behind my head. Anyway, the temperature wasn't that cold. I didn't feel that bad. And so I dried off and I grabbed my gear and I walked up to the van, which was, I don't know, maybe an eighth of a mile walk, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I opened the back, I unlocked it, made sure I knew where I put the keys this time, walked around to the back, opened it up, turned on the water, sprayed out the gloves and the boots. Although I gotta say, so this is an inlet and there's a creek coming down. I think this is, what is it called? Ellis Inlet or something? I don't know, something like that. Saw it on the map. And so there's a creek coming down here, and the water was not, I think it was mostly fresh water where I am right there. It was not that salty at all. But I washed out my gloves and my boots with a hose on the back of the van. And so I'm outside, and it's using cold water, and I'm still feeling really good. And so then I dumped it all out. I went back inside, dried off, kind of took my time, goofed off a little bit, and by about, I don't know, so we were going to leave at noon. So it was around, 20 after 11 when I started to drive back up to the meeting, and where Sarah was. And I got there at around 11:30, and I was, I put on my I was wearing my long shorts that I like to wear, and tennis shoes, and I had my hoodie and my blue puffy on over that, and the hat that I'm wearing I left on. And I'm feeling cold, but I'm not feeling, horrible. And I actually, when I got in the van, I turned on the space heater to heat things up, and that felt really good initially. And when I drove in, I had the heater cranked, and I felt pretty good driving in. And so I get back to the Olympia Hotel, and I pull in, and I walk in, and as I'm walking in to the meeting, I start thinking, I'm really cold. I'm like colder than I'm used to being. This is, my hands are feeling a little bit weird, and I'm having trouble. I'm clenching, and by now I've been out of the water, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes maybe, and I'm starting to just really my muscles are getting tight, and I'm really working to relax. And so I go on in to the meeting, and they're talking away, and so I kind of went and stood in a corner and leaned against the wall. And, was moving around a little bit, and I was looked down, and my legs are pink, still. And I'm like, wow, I'm really cold. So then David Simmons, one of the guys in the meeting, he sees me standing over there. He's like, come over and sit by me, come over here. And so I go over and I sit down next to him. And I'm sitting there, and I realize my legs are shaking. Oh, and by the way, I had a big thing of licorice tea ready to go when I came back out, and so I had drunk that. And I felt really good coming out. But then I think, I was just in a really long time, and as it turns out, I was actually in 22 minutes here before I got out, and I think my extremities got colder than normal, and my core I think was still good until I started warming up, and as you say, the capillaries started opening up, and that cold blood in the extremities kind of came into my core. And so I'm sitting there in that chair, and my legs are I'm just shivering, and he didn't notice, but I don't shiver that much. I tend to be I tend to be fine, but it was I was surprised at how cold I was. And so finally at about 10 after 12, Sarah was like, we really have to go. And so we got up and got in the van, and it was a 4.5 hour drive home. We came down to Vancouver and then cut up the gorge on the Washington side over to the Bridge of the Gods, and it was beautiful. I mean, the weather was like this all day. It was beautiful and sunny, but we got in the van and I had the heat cranked, and I wasn't warm until we got to Vancouver. So it was another 2 hours. We got down there when I kind of felt comfortable, and we stopped for gas in the Dalles, and at that point I took off my coat. But yeah, it ended up being it was interesting because I felt fine while I was in there. I never felt, I didn't even really feel uncomfortable. But I did get some pain in my arms at some point. I can't remember when that was, if that was actually when I started warming up once I was back in the van. I think it might have been. But yeah, and it was beautiful down there. Like you can't see. I wish I'd had a slightly wider angle view of this, because looking out, like somebody was sculling by. There were boats. There were birds all around me diving under the water, and they weren't that far away. And it was just an absolutely beautiful soak and a great location for it. I got to say, and there were a couple people who walked by, but not very many. The previous day when I was there were a lot of people, and there were birds flying in and out of the frame. When I watched the video, like on several occasions, birds flew through the frame, which was really cool. So I wish I had that video, but I don't. Yeah, so maybe someday, I don't know, if you're out here, this is a great spot, especially early in the morning on a sunny day. Actually, it would be awesome. It was pretty misty when we got up, and to be out there right at sunrise, I bet it would have been super misty, and it would have looked really cool. But yeah, it was a good soak, but it was also more challenging, I think, than any soak. I mean, the feeling afterwards was definitely, I mean, it was work to try to relax myself. I found myself just tensing up because I was so cold. And actually, once I was in the van, I had the heat going. I felt I was losing the fine dexterity in my hands wasn't there. And the only time previously when I felt this way was the time, I know I've told you about this, when Scott Fairley and I went and did the Buck Mountain Loop hike, which is 16 miles in it, and it was wet snow on us the whole way, and we weren't really ready for it. And we hiked the whole way and we felt fine, but then we got in his truck to drive home, and he had the heat cranked, and when we got home, I was so, like, as he would say, all stove up, like I was just, my whole body was cramped, and I had trouble standing up to get out of his truck. And that's kind of how I felt this time. But no regrets. I just want you to know that if I had died staying in too long to try to satisfy the desires of my friends, who seem to think that just staying in for 6 minutes in cold water is not enough, that's where we would have been. And I don't want you to feel guilty about that, but there are consequences to our actions, and it's the kind of thing that maybe you should consider in the future. Anyway, I had a great time visiting you. I really appreciate you hosting me. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you again in the not too distant future. I will talk to you soon, but until then, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.